Good morning, everybody. I can see people popping into our webinar, so welcome. I am just going to give it another minute until we have a full room, and then I will get started. Good morning, everyone. For those of you who have just joined, welcome to today's webinar. Just got a few more people joining, so I'm just going to give it a few more seconds and then we will get started. Okay, thank you everybody for joining today. I think we will get started. There's still a few people joining, but yeah, hopefully we've got the majority here. So thank you everyone, a fantastic turnout. You can see we've already got 72 participants with us today. So welcome all of you to today's webinar on the flats recycling package. Fantastic to have so many people here. We are going to start today just with some introductions. So I'm going to just close down my screen and let our panelists all pop their videos on. So here we are all appearing. Yeah, we obviously are the local authority support team who are delivering this today and are your front point of contact. So I thought it'd be a really good opportunity for us to for you all to meet the team here, and I know lots of you will know many of our faces, but not all of us. So I am Sarah Williams, senior advisor. I've just been here within ReLondon for 2 months, so a new recruit to the team. I have 15 years of local authority waste and recycling experience, having most recently moved from Hackney Council over to ReLondon. And I'm just going to move around the team so that we can introduce ourselves, and you will have had the opportunity to see us all here today.
Hi there. So as Sarah said, really great to have so many people logged on this morning. I'm really looking forward to presenting to you the results of the latest flats work that we've been doing. I'm Anthony Buchan. I'm head of programme for ReLondon's local authority support activities.
Morning everyone. As Anthony said, it's great that we've got so many participants today. My name is Kathy Cook. I'm a senior advisor with ReLondon.
Morning everyone. I'm Liz Horsfield and I am a strategic advisor here in the local authority support team at ReLondon. I've been here for about a year and I've been involved in the latest flats recycling project during that time.
Morning, everyone. I'm Casey. I'm an advisor in the local authority support team at ReLondon. I work on various circular economy projects with local authorities in London. I've been here for just over a year, and I am the key account manager for all the West London boroughs, so Western Riverside boroughs and Westminster City Council. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Freya. I'm another advisor in the local authority support team. I'm another recent recruit to ReLondon, so I started in July and was previously a consultant at Eunomia. And I'm the key account manager for all North and East London boroughs.
Lovely. And I'm Shelley Holmes, so I'm also an advisor at ReLondon for the South London and Unitary boroughs. And I have previous experience working in waste partnerships within local authority waste teams and also the textiles recycling sector.
Brilliant. Thank you, everybody. So that is our whistle-stop tour of the local authority support team. Hopefully good for some of you putting faces to names. So somebody's just said in the chat that they can't hear me. I don't think that's a common problem. If a couple of people could perhaps say that they can, or if they can't, then that would be really fantastic before we start. Right, Brill. Oh, thank you, Matthew. So yeah, apologies, Sonu, but it sounds like that might be a problem your end rather than mine. Lots of people saying they can hear me, so that's super news. So I will get cracking, and hopefully Sonu can sort that out and be able to hear me, but in Mo we'll be switching over to some other speakers as well, so hopefully you'll be able to hear them even if there is a problem with me. So before we get into the real content of today, just a couple of very quick housekeeping pieces. So two things. One, if you can, you'll all see that you have been, you're on a mute function. So if you can just pop your questions in the Q&A as we go, that would be super. And then we'll run through those at the end of the session rather than as we go. But yeah, do feel free to chip in as and when suits you with it into that Q&A box. And I can see that obviously through you some of you just posting that you can hear me, you obviously found that and see how to use that and it's working. And then the only other thing to say is that the session will be recorded and then shared with participants afterwards. And I saw someone just as we began asking a question about sharing the slide deck. We are going to be sharing a condensed version of the slide deck at the end as well with the key information. So yeah, you can expect that afterwards. So in terms of what we are going to run through today, hopefully nothing surprise here to you all, but just a quick introduction really from me to us as ReLondon and also this webinar today. And then Liz is going to talk to us a little bit more about the overview of the flats recycling package. And then Shelley is going to go into the details of the operational elements, Liz, the communication side, and then I will you'll hear back from me in terms of some further resources and support that we're able to provide you when trying to implement this work. And then we'll have, as we said, our Q&A. We've got a long slot for Q&A at the end, so hopefully we can really have some discussion there around anything that comes up from the session today. So firstly, who are ReLondon? Some of you know, and some of you know that very well, and some of you won't. So just going to quickly run over. And also the other purpose of this is really just to make sure that I know many of you know us, the local authority support team, but there is also a slightly wider remit for ReLondon, so useful for many of you to know a little more about that. So we are a unique organisation. We are a statutory body. We're a partnership of the Mayor of London and the local authorities yourselves. And we are here to work with you to improve waste and resource management across London, and to kind of through that to create a circular city. And we really, our ultimate drive and aim is about trying to revolutionise people's, citizens, ourselves, our relationship with stuff, so that ultimately we are all and we as Londoners are consuming less and reusing and repairing more, and that becomes the norm. So as an organisation, there's kind of three main areas within us. You can break it down to 3 kind of key areas. So there's the local authority support team. As I said, most of you will be most familiar with us, and you've met the full team just now. And as you probably know, we are here to help you, to help support local authorities to rethink plans and policies and approaches to help supporting recycling improvements across London, and obviously specifically on flats today, and also through circular economy, as well as the waste and recycling services, through the delivery of advice and projects. And then we also within the organisation have the business transformation team, which I know some of the local authorities work with, but some will not. So we, through that area of work, we support London's small and medium-sized businesses. And we're there to kind of work with those businesses to try and help them create circular business models through through advice particularly, but also grants and other making connections between the different businesses across London and different organisations. And then many of you will be aware of our communications arm. So we have our communications and behaviour change team who are working to empower and educate Londoners, and again in very much in close working with you and local authorities to help with this ultimate aim of revolutionising the relationship with staff through our campaigns work. So quite a breadth of work that we deliver as an organisation. And in terms of us, the local authority support team, there are 4 key areas of work. So there is our research and insights work, which is things like the work that's gone into creating this package of information that we'll be sharing with you today on the flats recycling, but also things like our cost of contamination toolkit and heaps of downloadable communications assets, all sorts of different work that comes out of that. Also a large area of work focused on sharing ideas and best practice, and again through things like our webinar that we're hosting now and others. And there'll be lots more coming up, which I'll touch on in a minute. We also have our a large area of work focusing on accelerating the circular economy. So we have our Circular Neighbourhoods Collaboration Group working with other local authorities and organisations across London who are focusing on delivering circular economy or work on a neighbourhood level. And also our circular economy matchmaker led by our business transformation team, which I just mentioned. So a platform that helps to connect circular businesses with other like-minded businesses, but also with local authorities such as yourselves. And then we have our RRP support, which we are very busy with at the moment. So the vast majority of you have submitted your RRPs to the GLA, and we're working very closely with the GLA to deliver those initial reviews and also utilising that opportunity. We're seeing that as a really important opportunity for us to identify any potential scope for collaboration and sharing where we see similar work going on in different areas of London, which people may not be aware of. So there'll be further opportunities coming out of that as well. And as well as all of this free support that we offer to boroughs, we're also now offering some areas of paid for work as well, which is more bespoke work where boroughs are asking for us to work with them closely. And then we also have our ReLondon's Academy, which is working to try and work very closely with local authorities, but broader than just our waste and recycling services or departments, and trying really hard to work with local authorities to embed the circular economy principles across the local authorities in entirety, looking in a more holistic manner. So working with procurement teams, finance teams, housing regeneration, and really trying to deliver change across the whole organisations and help organisations, local authorities, to fully understand their role in the circular economy. And you can see there some of the boroughs that we've already been working to deliver the academy with, and that is a combination of free and paid for training modules. I mentioned some upcoming things, so these are building upon 2 areas of interest that we've seen from the boroughs. So we have 2 things coming up, which may be in many of your diaries, and if not, then we will share this afterwards. But we have a recycling on the go or recycling in public spaces webinar, which will be building on some funding that's available from Hubber, and also a flat swap shops workshop in person, coming up in a month's time on the 1st of December. So moving to the topic of today, obviously key focus on flats. That's what you're all here to hear about. But hopefully that context into ReLondon and some of the broader work that we're doing is helpful for this. So just to quickly take you through our focus on estates and why we're here and why we're talking about this. And before I do that, just to say, I just called it estates. Estates, flats, blocks, high-rise, very much interchangeable terms. So when you hear us mentioning those, we're talking about purpose-built flats. So we must think about the drivers for improving service provision in flats. I think hopefully you're all here because you know that it's a key area of focus and hopefully are aware of why. But obviously one of our key drivers is the London Mayor's targets, very stretching targets through the London Environment Strategy, and with a huge proportion of London's population living in high-rise purpose-built flats, it really is a key area of focus to help us hit that 50% recycling target. We also have the driver of the government resources and waste strategy. So twofold, we have the new consistency requirements, which do include flats within that, and us, and the importance of us providing dry and food waste recycling services coming in, as well as the extended producer responsibility reforms. So with that new scheme, local authorities will be receiving payments for materials collected for recycling, and we believe that these could be withheld where systems are found to be inefficient or ineffective. So another really important driver for getting things right in estates or blocks, flats in London. And as I said, a growing proportion of Londoners living in flats, so anticipated that by 2030, almost half of the population are projected to live in purpose-built flats. So the need for those effective services really will continue to grow. And therefore, improving recycling rates from flats is really, really important, but also really, really challenging. I don't think anybody here would dispute that. So here at ReLondon, we have developed this package, which we're going to talk about today, to help support local authorities, but also housing associations and managing agents in providing services that really do work for residents and help us to deliver that positive change that is needed. I'm now going to hand over to Liz to take us through the next few slides.
Thanks, Sarah. So we're here today to introduce you to the updated toolkit for the flats recycling package. So I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about the background to the toolkit, the work that ReLondon has previously done on purpose-built flats, and how the flats recycling package has been developed as a result of that work. So starting with the challenge of recycling from flats and why we've been focused on this, we know that the recycling rate from communal collections from purpose-built flats tends to be significantly lower than from curbside rounds, and contamination rates are usually high. The reasons for this do vary and can be hard to pinpoint, but it can include historically poor services to flats, poor design or condition of bin stores and bin areas, a lack of accountability over individuals' waste due to the communal nature of collections, and it can also be due to demographic issues like population transients, high turnover of residents, language barriers, and people having other priorities other than waste. So we've carried out extensive research into recycling from purpose-built flats to try and find ways to overcome some of these issues as far as possible, and looking at services from a resident's perspective to design solutions that work for people as well as for organisations. Next slide, please, Sarah. So we've undertaken two projects around flats recycling. The first, which started in 2018, was a 2-year project on dry recycling, which we ran in partnership with the Housing Association Peabody and 6 inner London boroughs to better understand the barriers to recycling for people who live in flats and discover what practical measures could be taken by housing providers, managing agents or service providers to help overcome those issues. So we started off by undertaking detailed inventories of 132 estates in London, so a really big undertaking to see what was really going on in terms of recycling service provision and the conditions of facilities. And this revealed that there was a general lack of consistency in service provision between estates. We also carried out detailed ethnographic research with residents to really understand their perspectives and the barriers to recycling that they experience. Interestingly, this research was framed as being about household chores in general when it was carried out, so that people didn't know they were being specifically asked about recycling at the start, to reduce confirmation bias, where people tell you what they think you want to hear. So we got really good detailed information from that. And what that showed was that the barriers to effective recycling were many, and they could be complex, and it showed that good intentions to recycle are not enough. So effective recycling is only achieved when residents want to recycle, know how to recycle, and find it easy to do so. So from that research, we developed the first flats recycling package, which is a set of operation and communication guidelines designed to bring the look and feel of recycling services of flats up to a common standard and provide clear and reliable information to residents. And we rolled out the package alongside some behavioural interventions on 12 estates in Islington, Camden, Lambeth, Tower Hamlets, Hackney and Westminster. Those interventions were all based on those key principles of ease, knowledge and motivation, and addressed the problems of inconsistent services and information, making sure that bins and bin areas are well maintained, ensuring capacity and appropriate bins, and making sure that communication was clear. And I'll come to the results of that project shortly. But moving on to our second flats project in 2021, the second project was co-funded by the Ecosurety Discovery Fund and delivered in partnership with Lambeth Council and Peabody. It was designed to build on the findings of the first project and expand services to include food waste in view of the upcoming national and local government requirements, and also to provide high quality services for all residents wherever they lived. We also trialled pop-up collections for textiles and small electricals and separate bins for large cardboard as part of this project, because we knew this was during COVID and there'd been an increase in cardboard from homes. So to solve some of those blockage issues, capacity issues, we trialled those. We also introduced in-home storage for dry recycling partway through the project. We also refreshed the recycling and the rubbish services and co-located bins wherever possible on this project to make recycling journeys as straightforward as possible for people so they could dispose of everything at the same time, and close chutes where they were in place. We used disruptive relaunch communications to improve knowledge of existing facilities as well as highlighting new ones, and we'll talk through this in more detail in the coming section of the session. So the impact of the projects, for both of the projects, we carried out very detailed monitoring and evaluation, including waste composition analysis and resident feedback on the changes. And what we found was that dry recycling rates increased in both projects. So from Flats 1, we saw an average 26% increase in dry recycling rates. From Flats 2, we saw an average 152% increase in recycling rate, that a 16 percentage point increase. So much of that was from food, but we did also see a significant increase in dry recycling in that project. The capture rates of the dry materials increased in both cases, by 22% in the first project and 44% in the second. And food waste capture from Flats 2 project was an average of 35%. In one case, in one of the estates, it was 43%, which is comparable with some curbside rounds. Feedback from residents on the projects was that the changes were helpful. We've got a quote there from a resident in the first project, that the changes have motivated them to recycle more, which is exactly what we wanted. And we did get feedback from the second project that the eye-catcher communications were effective in drawing attention to existing services. And we did also receive feedback from residents in the second project that they recognised the investment that the council was making in the facilities, and they felt that they wanted to reciprocate that investment by using them, which was an interesting finding. So All of this information was used to update the flats recycling package following the second project. So as I said, the package itself is a set of guidelines designed to bring the look and feel of recycling services up to a common standard and provide residents with clear and reliable information. The reason we updated the flats recycling package is that we know that it's effective in increasing the quality and the quantity of recycling from purpose-built flats. And the key principles underlying the package are knowledge, ease and motivation. So residents, effective recycling is achieved when residents have the correct knowledge to recycle, they find it sufficiently easy and they're motivated to do so. So this is the flats recycling package, the updated version. I'm not going to talk through each of these in detail now, because that's the rest of the session today, but just to show what we mean when we're talking about the flats recycling package. This is the guidelines. The points in bold there are the ones that have been updated since the Flats 2 project. The full reports from both of the projects that I've mentioned are available online on our website, but today is all about the toolkit, which is really the practical how-to guide for rolling out the flats recycling package and putting these guidelines into practice. The toolkit document is also on our website, so you can read it at your leisure, but we're going to spend some time today talking through each of the guidelines here and bring some of the additional learnings from our projects with hints for key things to think about and consider when putting them into place. So just a reminder that if you have any questions as we go through, please type them into the Q&A box, and we've got plenty of time at the end to answer those. So I'm now going to hand over to Shelley, who's going to talk through the key stages of putting the flats recycling package into place and the operational guidelines in a bit more detail. So over to you, Shelley.
Lovely, thank you, Liz. So I'm just going to be speaking for the next few minutes on the implementation of the package. So briefly summarising the key stages of each of these steps, and then delving in a bit more to some of the specific operational aspects to consider. So next slide, please, Sarah. Lovely. So the first stage of the package is really identifying what estates you want to target. So this is the scope of your project, thinking about if there are certain estate sizes or types of estate that you want to target. So if you don't already know what estate you want to roll out to, there are a few possible ways that you could potentially do this. So thinking about the type of estate that you want to roll out to, you might decide initially you only want to focus on housing stock managed by your council or your housing association, or you might decide that you want to focus initially on privately managed blocks. You might ask the crews of any hotspot areas that they regularly encounter problems at, or there might be other council teams such as your housing or enforcement officers that you could also ask. And you might use data to inform where you want to start to implement the package. This could be data such as your in-cab contamination reports. But if you don't have access to this type of information and you don't actually know how your estates are performing, then you might actually need to scope all of your flats. So to help you with this, you could speak to your council GIS officer, and you could ask them to provide you with a map and a list of your addresses of all of your flats, or they can actually also provide you with a list of flats and over a certain number of properties as well. If you do undertake any site visits, there is a downloadable site plan as part of the toolkit, or your GIS department might already have a data collection tool in place available that you can use. And after you've undertaken your initial scoping site visits, you might want to revisit some of the sites a few more times a day before collection and just record how full the refuse and recycling bins are, any key contaminants, any bulky waste issues, and this can really help further narrow down where you'll roll the package out to, and it can actually help benchmark performance later on. So the second stage to think about is your budget. So whose and which budget any spend will be attributed to. So you might need to decide which part of the toolkit will be funded by your budget and which parts will need to be funded potentially by housing associations or managing agents. So for example, the bins might initially be funded by the council and any groundworks the housing provider. And be clear from the offset about which part of the package will be your capital spend, so any outright costs, and any revenue spend, so potentially any ongoing costs as well. And we'll talk about ongoing costs in some more detail later on, but a really important consideration for the package is ongoing maintenance. So considering who will fund things like replacing bin lids, locks and wheels as they wear and tear, or replacement items for residents like reusable recycling bags, liners, or even regular cleaning of the food housing units. You'll also, if you're looking to change the type of collections, so if you're looking to implement more frequent collections or a food waste collection service, you might also need to consider if there are any additional contract costs as well to consider. And also you need to consider the actual cost of the toolkit, so the actual delivery of the bins, and if you need to outsource any tasks like installing signage. Every council works differently, but it's really important as part of the package to understand your council's budget setting processes and any timeframes that you need to meet to be able to secure budget sign off. And at this stage as well, ensure you've actually reviewed what resource you have, and this includes tasks like actual resource for delivering the bins. Next slide, please, Sarah. So key to implementing the package and making any changes is understanding who the stakeholders are in your project. So these could be internal stakeholders, so councillors, portfolio holders, budget managers and contact centre teams. Your operational stakeholders, so these could be your collection crews, your contractor or operations team, your waste disposal authority or your disposal contracts, and this is particularly important if you need to notify them if you're implementing any new collections like food waste, and your community stakeholders, so managing agents, housing providers, resident community groups and caretakers. And you just need to consider how you will engage with stakeholders and get buy-in from the project, but also ensure that you plan enough time to engage with each of them before rolling out the package. So after you've narrowed down your sites, which you're going to target, then you'll need to undertake a more thorough site assessment just to be clear exactly how many bins you'll need and where they'll go. So if you can, again, try and visit the sites as near to the collection day as you can to understand the levels of waste, contamination and fly tipping. And there is a site assessment tool to download from the ReLondon website as well as part of the toolkit. So if possible, undertake a site visit with one of your community stakeholders, so the managing agent or housing association, and if possible, one of your operational colleagues as well. Some key points to consider when undertaking site assessments are, firstly, how many bins there currently are per block, how many bins might be needed, how many and what type of bins will fit into the space. At this stage, it's actually good practice to measure out any of the bin stalls whilst you can if you are there on site. This is particularly important if you're looking to introduce additional services later on. So whilst you're there, also check that the lighting is working and record what the general condition of the store is, what type of signage and how large and what material it might be if you're going to erect signage above the recycling bins. And you could actually also speak to caretakers as well at this point and capture what their experiences are at the site. If you're with a stakeholder, then you can actually have conversations as well about how to better manage bulky waste. And also if there's any additional advertising opportunities across the estate, so for example, any unused notice boards in the entranceways or any other places to install additional signage. If you are looking to change where the bins are situated, look also at what groundworks might be needed. So this includes things like looking at guardrails if you're placing bins next to existing walls or fences, and bollards if you're relocating to spaces where the bins might have the potential to be blocked by parked cars. And make sure that if you are choosing to relocate the bins, that any new areas are well lit, and also make sure that your operations team are happy with the proposals, because there actually might be legitimate reasons that the bins cannot be placed in those locations. If you have metal bins in stock or you only use metal bins to provide to your flats, you might want to prioritise refurbishing them potentially rather than buying new. So recording the condition of the metal bins, if they're suitable with refurbishment, including the brand and the size of bin, could be really helpful at this stage. And also you want to agree responsibilities with the managing agent as well. So for example, asking them to ensure that the stores are free from items when you come to deliver the bins, and agreeing other things like who will install signage and who will notify the residents of changes. And maintenance is really crucial to the success of the package. So establishing who will be responsible for things like broken lids, keeping the bin stores clean and tidy, delivering replacement liners and replacing signage if it falls down. And remember, when undertaking the site plan, really think about the residents who live there and making sure that the changes will make disposing of their waste and recycling as easy as possible. Next slide, please, Sarah. So once the site assessments have been undertaken, then it's time to get sign-off from all of your stakeholders who should agree to the overall plan and also their responsibilities. So using your site plans, you want to develop a more detailed plan, which includes the exact number, size and location of bins that you're going to provide, where the signage will be erected, who will deliver the communications to residents, and other responsibilities such as making sure that the bin areas are brought up to standard before delivering any new bins. And as part of this stage, also aim to have some dates for actions to have been completed by. So remember to also take into account any time the housing provider or the managing agent might need if any costs fall on them, because there will likely be a period that they will need to get sign off on spend. And also as well, remember to think about your own procurement processes and timelines as well. So once everyone has agreed the plan, then it's time to begin planning for rollout. So dependent on the scale of change you're proposing, you might want to consult with your contractor or your operations team just to discuss the best approach to delivering the package. For example, what resources they can commit to and when, because they actually might have other contractual priorities, maybe set deliveries, where they're unable to provide resource. So when thinking about the rollout plan, this again can be broadly split into categories that we use in our stakeholder engagement. So thinking about internal plans for members or contact centre colleagues. So thinking about when you need to brief them and what types of information that they need to know. The plan for residents, so this will include how many bins and of what type that you need to procure, what liners, caddies, reusable bags that you'll probably be providing them, and any timeframes to procure these. The types of communications that you'll provide, so including how long the design sign-off stages will be, where they'll be delivered to and where they'll be stored. And if you have to agree, if you've agreed to deliver the communications to liners, actually planning for how you'll access the blocks or any post boxes. And finally, the plan for the contractors. So providing them with the delivery and site plans in a format as agreed with them, when the bins signage needs to be delivered by, checking with them if there's any crew training needed, and this is particularly important if you're introducing locked recycling bins or a food waste collection service, agreeing with them what the first collection dates for any materials might be, and at this stage as well, check with your operations and contract teams practical considerations, so making sure that the depot has enough space to store the planned number of bins or housing units that you're looking to order, and discussing with them how the disposal of any old bins that return from site will be managed. And at this stage as well, it's probably pertinent to discuss any contingency planning. So if the contractor is unable to deliver the bins or the signage on the day for any reason, understanding what delivery timescales they'll work to, or what your alternative delivery options are, and how this might also impact the parts of your rollout. An implementation template is actually available as part of the toolkit to download from the ReLondon website. So next slide please, Sarah. When it comes to the actual delivery, we recommend where possible you be in attendance to help guide the contractor on the day. So if you're rolling out to multiple sites across the week, aim to attend the larger sites if you can, or where the changes might be a bit more complex. If you spot check the sites after the contractors delivered the bins, you can also sign off each site. And at this stage, it might be useful to have a checklist to ensure that the rollout has been completed successfully and that you're happy with the changes. And the next stage is to monitor the impact. So after you've implemented the package, we recommend revisiting the sites or undertaking post-monitoring if you undertook pre-monitoring to monitor your impact. So attempt to revisit the site if you can within the first week to resolve any potential issues, and at least monthly if you're not undertaking any regular post-monitoring. Remember, if you have access to it, you can use your contractors' data, such as in-cab data, to benchmark improvements. And at this stage, we also really recommend seeking feedback from the different stakeholders as well. So we've just spoken in some detail about the different stages of implementing the package, but I'm just going to talk a bit more specifically now on some of the operational considerations. So just to reiterate, when you're designing site plans, consider the whole journey for the resident. So from when they decide what to dispose of in their homes, how they separate out their items, how they carry it to the bins, and where they dispose of their waste. So most services, as Liz touched on earlier, are designed with the crews or operations in mind rather than the residents. So our research showed that in addition to motivating and knowledge, people must find it easy to use recycling facilities to be able to maximise recycling participation. So the main operational elements of the recycling package are: so the collection of the 6 main dry recyclables and food. So in line with government proposals for consistent collections, your dry recycling service should really ideally collect paper, card, glass, food and drinks cans, plastic bottles, pots, tubs and trays, and food waste. It might also be worth clarifying with your recycling facilities what exactly can be accepted to make sure that your communications are correct for residents, and also for the purpose of any crew training to make sure that the crews know exactly what they should be collecting. And as Liz mentioned earlier, we recommend that you close any chutes and situate any rubbish and recycling bins next to one another, again to ensure that recycling is as easy as possible for residents. So the next operational element is ensuring that you've got appropriate bins, including caddies and liners. So really, when thinking about what bins to provide, you want to provide bins with an aperture that should be big enough to accept flattened boxes, but not necessarily large bags of waste. Ideally, reverse lids could be used to reduce the likelihoods of residents lifting the lid up. And again, going back to thinking about the journey for the resident, so look at what you could provide them in their home. So this could be a reusable bag to help them store, carry and tip their recycling into the bins loose, or providing indoor caddies or liners. When we spoke about budgets earlier, we did touch on maintenance. So think about your policies or processes for providing such indoor items and what this might be after the initial rollout, because liners might actually help improve food capture. So thinking about whether liners will be available at libraries or if you will deliver them on demand to residents. And for food, you might want to consider using food housing units. So these encase the food waste bin, and they also restrict large bags of waste from being placed into it. And these bins can also be fitted with a foot pedal, which reduces the need for residents to touch the lids of the bin, reducing any perceived hygiene issues. As with any new bins, check with your operations team or your contractor just to make sure what you're proposing is compatible with their vehicles and operations. The next one is adequate collections to prevent overflows. So this ties in really when you're planning to roll out to your flats package. So calculating the volumes of waste that will likely arise from the site and therefore the number of bins and collections that you will need. So if more waste is produced and can be contained, you might want to consider either adding in additional bins, or you could potentially use larger bins. So for example, using 1280s rather than 1100s because they occupy the same footprint but offer more capacity, or providing more frequent collections. But please do check with your contractor or operations team to make sure that additional collections are possible, and check whether there's any additional collection charges associated with this as well. Again, make sure that your contractor or operations team have actually updated the collection information in their in-cab systems, and that crews have been made aware of the changes as well. And this is really important to consider, especially adding food as a collection, just to make sure that it's not missed. So you want to make sure that collections are consistent, and there's a process to deal with any contaminated recycling as well to prevent overflowing waste, which has a knock-on effect to the recycling quality. So the next operational element to consider is clean and well-maintained bin areas. So a clean and well-maintained bin area will contribute to keep residents on board, but also ensure that the bin stores and stores are used as intended. And it should actually help make the operations easier if waste is being containerised and managed well and isn't overflowing. So for example, giving cleaners or caretakers on site any spare keys for the bins so they can open them. This might help if large boxes are left on the floor, so the caretakers can put the large boxes into the recycling bins. And these sort of things will really help keeping the store look clean, but also hazard-free for the crews and for the residents as well. Over time, bin lids and locks might warp or get damaged. So again, just to reiterate, to make sure that everyone is aware of who is responsible, not just for purchasing replacements, but also who is responsible for fitting those as well. And for the contractor, they need to make sure that the crews are trained to ensure they put any new bins back correctly, so waste isn't left on the floor, and there's spare keys as well for the recycling and any food waste bins. The maintenance of bin stores is really important to ensuring the long-term success of the package. We want to keep recycling easy for residents so they continue to be motivated to recycle. And the next operational element is undertaking regular visits. So this is the final element of the operations to consider. This is the final element of the operations, really just to understand how the site is performing and making sure that the package is effective. So ReLondon undertook monthly site visits previously just to understand how any cleanliness problems that were occurring, looking at any damaged bins and ensuring the bins were being put back correctly. So on this slide, we have an example here of a nut missing from a food waste housing lid and the cardboard bin being put back incorrectly by crews in a way that's inaccessible to residents or caretaker. So we also, at this stage, also spoke to residents and any cleaners just to make sure if there were any other ongoing issues we weren't aware of, such as fly tipping, for example. And if you undertook regular pre-monitoring before implementation, you might want to go back to these sites and use the same monitoring form to benchmark your performance at the same frequency of visits, so you can see exactly what the impact has been. So to summarise, when implementing the package, consider these 3 themes. The first is the scope of the package, so how you'll target your flats, how you'll identify and engage stakeholders, and checking with your collection contracts and your operations team, just to make sure that the changes you want to implement can actually be made. The second theme to consider is your budget, so speaking good time with your budget holders and finance colleagues to make sure you're aware of budget timeframes and procurement processes. And ensuring you've thought what your initial costs will be and any ongoing costs, and these include potential contractual ones as well. And the third and final theme to consider is processes. So who will deliver the package? Is any crew training needed to ensure its success? And processes to maintain the bins and the bin stores, so including processes to report contaminated or broken bins. And finally, how you will undertake site inspections, the frequency of what you will record and how you will record it when on site. So if you have any questions for this section, please use this as an opportunity to put that into the chat now, and I shall hand you back over to Liz.
Thank you, Shelley. So I can see there's quite a few questions in there already, which is great. Thank you. So yeah, please keep them coming. And Sarah, if we could move on to the next slide. Thank you. So I'm going to cover the communication elements of the flats recycling package now, just starting with some key principles around communication and behaviour change. So behavioural science tells us that changing ingrained habits, such as how we dispose of waste at home, is challenging, and it's unlikely that information on its own will change those habitual behaviours. People might not take much notice of their everyday surroundings, and they might not be aware of existing facilities. They might have other concerns that they consider more pressing than what they do with their waste. But alongside positive changes to infrastructure and the ease with which people can use the recycling system where they live, communications does play a really important role in increasing recycling participation and capture rates and reducing contamination. So in that context, it's important to note that clear, consistent communication can increase knowledge and motivation. So helping people understand what they need to do and what benefit it will bring to them. But because changing ingrained behaviours is difficult, using disruptive communications can be effective, and using positive problem-solving messages can avoid recycling being portrayed as just something else to do, another obligation. So communications should always be strong, colourful and visual, and should be planned at intervals to maintain interest. So those are sort of the key underlying principles of the communication elements of the FRP. Next slide, please. Okay, so the first of the communications guidelines in the updated package is clear and visible signage on rubbish, recycling and food bins and bin storage areas. So as I just said, clear communication to show what goes in each bin is essential in giving residents the right knowledge to be able to recycle correctly. It's really important because we know that people tend to think that they know what can and can't be recycled and don't necessarily check. So having it very visible is important to get those messages across. So with that in mind, you can take every opportunity to communicate those messages to people. So that means signage on the bin store doors, above the bins, on the front of the bins, and by the apertures of the bins. So there's multiple opportunities to see those messages whenever they go to put something in the bin store. But also keeping the condition, keeping signage in good condition is really important to maintain its impact. Shelley's just spoken about the importance of maintenance for the facilities, but that includes the communications as well. So the condition of signage and stickers should be included in your regular monitoring. Bin stickers should be printed with UV resistant ink so that they don't fade too quickly, and they should be replaced annually so that the communications stay fresh. So the next element, one of the new elements of the package now, is the use of disruptive communications and service relaunch to increase participation. This means different looking communications materials that are less council branded and giving a message to people to motivate people to recycle well. So for the Flats 2 project, we created a new set of communications materials to launch the food waste service, but also to relaunch the existing dry mixed recycling service. Because we'd found from insight work that residents are not always aware of their facilities, relaunching them with new eye-catching comms can be effective in bringing people on board. And we did find at the end of the Flats 2 project that there were residents who were engaged with the idea of recycling, but they hadn't been doing it because they didn't know they could, who since had engaged and were recycling well. So the new communications emphasise freshness, the idea of a fresh start, keeping things clean, getting food out of the residual bins, and giving a sense of care and investment from the authority into the facilities. The disruptive nature came from things like the floor vinyls, which is the arrow, the large arrow on the slide there, which interrupt people's journeys and draw attention to the facilities. And we also did things like putting up posters to let people know about the new and refreshed facilities. The second part of the relaunch communications was particularly around food waste services. So communicating clearly to people how they should use a new food waste service is essential, because you're asking people to take part in a more involved process when they're recycling their food waste using caddies and liners, and you need to communicate very clearly what you're asking people to do and why. So you might need to communicate this several times in different ways to give people notice that it's coming in advance, and then more detailed instructions nearer the time, letting them know that the service has started. We would recommend taking the opportunity to engage with residents face to face if possible. So for example, when delivering food waste caddies to estates, having the opportunity to have a conversation with people to explain the service, answer questions and encourage people can be really valuable in increasing engagement with it. Our research also showed that people may well not be aware of the benefits of food recycling. They may not link it to climate change, for example. So again, this could be communicated to provide the motivation to use the service. And we also used behavioural prompts when we were introducing the service in our Lambeth project. So we used a tea bag attached to a postcard, which you can see on the slide there, which encouraged people to make themselves a cup of tea and then recycle the tea bag in their new caddy. So it reinforced what could be recycled and encouraged them to use the service. And again, introducing the food waste service, we took lots of opportunities to inform people with a postcard, a sticker on the food caddy itself to let people know again what can go in it, and signage above and on the food waste bins and near the apertures to encourage participation. Next slide. So the final two elements of the package now are ongoing communications. So as with the operational elements of the FRP, the communications element shouldn't be seen as a one-off. To keep people motivated and address the issue of high resident turnover, you should plan a calendar of communication events. We don't mean sort of actual events here, although you could also do that, but as a minimum we would recommend a service leaflet delivered to all residents at least once a year, and you can look at adding extra communications opportunities like providing feedback via changing posters regularly. You could also think about increasing the engagement by making communications very locally focused, including the name of the estate where people live to link their actions to the service very specifically. And finally, informing residents what they should do with bulky waste. So the dumping of bulky waste around fly tipping, around bin areas can be a problem in estates. And again, this recommendation is around solving problems for people and giving them the knowledge to know what to do with their bulky waste rather than just leave it by the bins. So this could include signage at bin areas to inform people what to do and give people contact details, or it could be providing information in the annual service leaflet about your council's own bulky waste services or about free alternatives. So in our leaflets, we included information about Freegal so that people have a low-cost alternative to getting rid of bulky items if they are able to be reused, and it also promotes reuse. So that covers all of the communications guidelines within the flats recycling package. But we really wanted to draw your attention to the free resources that go along with the toolkit. So all of the communications materials that we used in both projects are available for you to download and adapt with your own borough logos and contact details. So to save you time and money and encourage consistency of messaging across London, which we know is helpful. We've got bin store signage, chute closure signs, above bins, bin stickers. We've also got template letters, posters, leaflets and postcards that you can adapt. We've provided single material signage if you've got separate collections for different materials, so you can create bespoke assets that suit your services. We hope that these will be really useful for authorities, and as they're all available from the Toolkit webpage on our website. So now I'm going to hand you back to Sarah to talk through all of the other resources linked to the flats work.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Liz. Yeah, just a quick whiz through of some of the resources available, and many of which, if not all of which, we have touched upon today. They form the basis to the information that we've just heard, an incredible wealth of information, detailed information about rolling out services to flats, which I really hope is helpful in your planning and delivery of next phases of your estate services, wherever you may be at on your journey. So available there, and we will send this, make sure we send this slide so you've got the links. We have the reports, so making recycling work for people in flats, and the flats 2 report, so the full reports with the results which were mentioned at the beginning, and as well we have a report with planning advice for new properties in terms of waste storage guidance. We also have our flats recycling toolkit, which is much of what has been run through today, but the key things to draw your attention to are the implementation plan template, improvement plan template, and also site assessment template, some really useful off-the-shelf tools that are there available for you to use and have been tried and tested. There's obviously the full set of downloadable communication assets, which Liz has just mentioned, and then there's also our cost benefit analysis tool, which is a comprehensive tool which helps you to be able to identify your full cost of implementing FRP, but also the benefits realised, so considering the benefits to boroughs, housing providers, but also particularly looking at the value of improved resident experience, which is a really interesting one and hopefully very valuable for you. And a new version of that, which is being updated by Liz, is going to be released very soon. And then lastly, before the Q&A, from the initial engagement that we've had with many boroughs, some of you out there listening today, we have realised that there is a demand for further bespoke support, as well as all of what we've just mentioned and the free assets available. Local authorities who are interested in more specific support to help them in their borough. So we've responded to this and made available at a cost some bespoke tailored support modules on all stages of the delivery that have been discussed today, really, but including things from the stakeholder engagement, which obviously we talked about being really critical, getting that buy-in so we can help to run workshops, facilitate things as an external body to really help get buy-in from wherever you may need it. Also, site assessments help critical review, peer review of implementation plans and ongoing strategic support. So that is something that is available on request. So do get in touch if you would like further information, and we can provide indicative costings for that. So that is our whistle-stop tour with an enormous amount of information on what we recommend from the outputs. of our flats recycling package in terms of implementing recycling services and improving recycling services on your estates. So we're going to move on to a Q&A. So I will stop sharing this slide, and you will hopefully see me and my colleagues appear back onto your screens. And Freya has very kindly been collating many questions that I have seen come in, which is fantastic. I haven't been able to concentrate entirely on the content of them. So Freya has been collating those, and we'll propose some of those for us as a team to try and collectively provide you with some responses to.
Thanks, Sarah. Yes, there's quite a few, but we do have some time to discuss, so I'll get straight into it. The first topic of questions, there was a couple on this. We mentioned chute closures. Is this something we recommend? There's often a significant pushback from residents. And is there any guidance or support available on how to go about doing this, and comms with residents, managing agents, etc.?
Okay, super question. So I don't know if Liz, you wanted to, or anyone specifically wanted to feed in on that. It is something that I've got some experience myself of doing in Hackney. We've done quite a lot of chute closures and are on a rolling programme to ultimately close all of the chutes. It is something that we recommend, and as ReLondon, and obviously have seen successes of, both as part of this project, but also in my experience in Hackney. And I do appreciate that we can receive some pushback. You will ultimately receive some pushback from residents who ultimately don't like change, and certainly don't want it to be made more difficult for them to use their services. But there are ways to work with that, and there are definitely overwhelming successes by implementing that. I don't know if anyone else wants to come in. If not, I'll share some of my on the ground experience in Hackney.
Just very quickly, just to say, to reiterate what you said, Sarah, that it's something that we would recommend as part of co-locating services, making the journey for people to put everything in the same place. It's an important part of that. But as Sarah said, and I think it's probably going to say more about it, is important to communicate with residents about that in advance and consult with them. And we did do that as part of this project. So yeah, I will hand back to you, Sarah, but just to reiterate what you'd already said.
Perfect. Yeah, I think one of the key pieces of advice that we've learned from on the ground work is about having that conversation, consulting with residents, listening to concerns and letting them have their voices heard. I think one key method that has been employed before and been successful is communicating with the resident around how they get that waste into their home. So obviously it goes in the form of generally packing, for the vast majority, packaging on food and similar items. And if there's a method in, then there's probably a method out. So they may have somebody doing their shopping for them, or certainly I'm talking about people with potentially with disabilities, or older residents who might struggle with perhaps stairs down to ground floor bins, and utilising those channels, encouraging residents to utilise those channels as a first port of call can actually be really valuable, and also potentially exploring opportunities. And I know there can be challenges with this, but exploring opportunities for things like on-site staff, caretakers, etc., to help out where possible. So yeah, there are methods for overcoming that, although I think it is something that we'll face. It's so important, and I think, like Liz has just said, the resident journey needs to be that you are forced to take all of your recycling and waste to one place and then be fronted with a decision on which bin that should go in, rather than having an easy option on the landing to dispose of your waste and then a tricky option, have to walk down the stairs and halfway across the estate to dispose of your recycling. Because when you're faced with that decision, you can begin to understand why somebody may take the easy option of popping it in the chute on the landing. So that is really critical. Also, I know that assessment can be done around increasing problems with chutes, and therefore driving a need for closure longer term, because many waste chutes were created in a time when the makeup of waste was very different to what it is now. And I know that there are a lot of problems often with blocked chutes from copious amounts of cardboard that people produce and unfortunately put down the waste chutes rather than recycle sometimes, and old crumbling waste chutes as well. So ultimately, I think it is something that we'd recommend long term to together with some consultation to close those down.
Thank you very much. I'll move on to another topic that had quite a lot of questions, and that was around capacity. So what is the recommended ratio for recycling to refuse? How did we calculate this? And was this anything to do with the size of household, number of bedrooms, etc.? And is this the same as other guidance such as Tower Hamlets SPD on waste provision for new developments?
Okay, Brill, I think that's a really good question, and there's certainly some information available on that on our website in the guide that I mentioned around waste storage, but I think Kathy has some experience she's going to share on that.
Yep, thank you. Thank you, Freya. Thank you, Sarah. Yes, so we recommend 60 litres per household per week for recycling. And we kind of assumed that the average size of a flat would basically have one bedroom. So we didn't do a sliding scale. I know the Tower Hamlets guidance, planning guidance, does have a bit of a sliding scale. And I've seen other planning guidance as well that's said if it's 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms, etc. Because this project was specifically looking at purpose-built flats, we just had it as that one size, because most flats would have been probably just 1 bedroom, no more than that. We didn't have a recommended amount for residual waste, so it was more important, I think, to get the recommended amount for recycling, just so we knew that there was always going to be enough capacity in order to dispose of recycling. In some cases, we did actually take residual bins out where there wasn't enough room, so we ensured that there was 60 litres per household per week for the number of residents in the estate. And then we obviously calculated the number of bins required. And in some places where there wasn't enough space, we actually removed the residual waste, because we were under the thought that if we were promoting all this, then residents should be able to recycle as much as possible. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you. And I think obviously it's about that overall waste arising. So generally speaking, if waste is diverted from the waste bins into the recycling bins, we should be able to reduce the number of waste bins as the overall waste arisings are shifted into the recycling stream. So exactly, really important one there. And I think again, it's similar principle with that visual aesthetics for the resident. If they're fronted when they go down with a sea of waste bins and not enough, 1 or 2 little lonely recycling bins on the end, then naturally that doesn't create the right habit. It doesn't create the right mind shift. Whereas when we're presented with a similar ratio of waste to recycling bins, it generally really helps with those behavioural shifts.
Yeah, thank you.
And just to add on the feed waste capacity, so the recommended capacity for the new package is 10 litres per household per week, which is based on 2 caddies. 2 caddies full per household per week, which you probably won't get, certainly not to start with, but it's sort of planning for the future as well on that. And the recycling capacities are they're the minimum. So if you're looking at things on a case-by-case basis when you're making the assessment for your estates, then you've always got the opportunity to increase that if you do have an estate with a lot of larger properties, for example.
Well, thank you. Freya, back to you. Next question.
Yes, so moving from capacity to the locations of bins, what would you recommend in terms of achieving a minimum travel distance from flats and also a minimum safety distance from dwellings from a fire safety perspective?
Brilliant, both really important considerations. I think Kathy's going to chip in on this in terms of travel distances. We generally try to work with 30 metres from no more than 30 metres drive distances for bins, but also bins for crews, but also bins being not too far from a resident user perspective as well. Kathy?
Yeah. So as with both of the packages, with the first package, we developed this kind of concept of ease, motivation and knowledge, which being the 3 key things that you need to increase recycling. So one of those ease would be the distance from where a resident would take their recycling down to their bin. We did a lot of ethnographic research, which was essentially doing a lot of surveys and studies with residents, and the distance between carrying it from their flat to the bin wasn't actually really highlighted. There was other issues that they felt they needed to overcome, but the distance didn't seem to be an issue to them. As you say, Sarah, we sort of work on 30 metres, but we don't have any specific recommendations in either the flats 1 or 2 projects to say that there has to be a certain minimum distance. And certainly that doesn't seem to be a barrier to residents. So yeah, we've not specified anything particularly, but maybe 30 metres is a good one to work with.
Well, and I think Shelley, did you want to chip in on the fire safety side of things?
Yeah, so I think this is where it's really important to visit with the managing agent or housing provider, because you'll need to take into account the site architecture. So making sure that obviously bins aren't underneath people's windows, right next to fire escape routes, etc. And that's where visiting with them will be really helpful, because they will know what the fire safety plans are for their sites and where is an appropriate location to be able to place the bins. On this as well, going back just to the carry distance for the residents, it's also important to visit with non-operational colleagues as well if you can, because the bulk bin distances are usually around 10 metres carry distance to the collection vehicle, 25, I think 40s up to 1100, something like that. So you just need to make sure that the placement of the bins is correct, not only from a fire safety point of view, so making sure there's no exit points that you're blocking, potentially going to block for the housing provider, but also that it's safe for the crews and an accessible location for the residents as well.
Brilliant, thank you. Freya, next question.
Thanks, Sarah. I think Shelley's just given a good segue onto the next topic, which is managing agents. So how would we recommend a borough implement the FRP in privately run estates? It's always very challenging getting engagement with managing agents. Do you have any recommendations for how to get managing agents to pay for improvements? Any hints on engaging with private managing agents? This is a recurring theme.
Yeah, and I'm definitely aware that that is a real concern and a real issue in many cases, rather than a perceived one. I don't know if anyone specifically wants to chip in on that, but we are certainly planning some future work around engaging with managing agents, because we're so aware of the importance of it and the challenges. Kathy?
Yeah, exactly, Sarah. So we've actually sort of started to hear this from a lot of different areas, from a lot of different local authorities, that engaging with managing agents and private landlords, it can be a barrier. When we worked on the first flats project, we worked in line with Peabody, and it was so important to have that good relationship, and that's why the project was such a success. As I say, we've got more and more questions from local authorities, so we have developed, or we are developing, a stakeholder engagement package, which is available to all of the London boroughs, and if anyone wants to go offline and sort of contact us directly and speak about that. So that would devise of a workshop working with managing agents, and just to sort of try and get managing agents on board to try to talk to them about the importance of the flats recycling package, about how to include it within their estates, why it's important, how it makes things a lot easier for residents, how it could save managing agents money in the long run, just by generally having a better area, like less to clean up, that sort of thing. So we are running, we're going to be running a series of stakeholder engagement workshops with anybody who is interested. So if they want to get in touch with us directly, then please do so after this webinar.
Brilliant, thanks, Kathy.
Thanks, Kathy. We've had a couple of questions specific to food waste. So I'm interested in how you're introducing food waste collections in flats where there is no space to do so. So maybe a question around storage space there. And where do you send your food waste, AD or IBC, and do they happily take compostable liners? I'm assuming this might differ regionally.
Yeah, certainly in terms of compostable liners, I know it not only differs regionally, obviously by local authority area, but also by the varying waste disposal authorities and their contracts that they have in place with their end destinations. And and it can vary massively, but generally fully compostable liners are acceptable, but there are much more varying responses and complications where plastic liners are in use. Liz, I don't know if you have anything you want to add in on that in terms of introducing food waste collections.
Yeah, on the space issue. So again, it's so there was one of the estates on the Flats 2 project where the bin stores that were in place were already fairly cramped and also fairly uninviting, and we weren't able to put food waste bins within them, so we actually put the food waste housing units with the bins just outside the bin stores on that estate, and so co-location wasn't entirely possible in that case. And I think that's, you know, it's on a case-by-case basis. If there isn't space within the existing bin store, then look for another location close by, or, you know, it may be that you could create some space with additional groundworks or additional paving to create some more areas for bins. But yeah, I mean, recognise that space can be a premium in a estate, so it's on a case-by-case basis, making that assessment of where bins can go in.
Great, thank you, Liz. I think that answers both parts of the question, Freya.
Yeah, thank you.
Good.
A couple of brief questions on lids. So how important is it to lock recycling lids shut? And the photos seem to show reverse lid bins. Are these recommended?
Yes, so that was touched on in the presentation. Good question. We definitely recommend that they are shut, and we do also recommend reverse lid bins where possible. Something to discuss with suppliers, though. There aren't many manufacturers, or not many, but there aren't many manufacturers of large bins, but there now are multiple manufacturers of reverse lid bins. Locked lids and reverse lid bins are a key component for reducing contamination, so really limits the user to the aperture rather than lifting the whole bin lid and or making it easy to unlock and lifting themselves, and that's something that generally does happen very frequently where lids are not locked down, and the reverse lid essentially makes it much harder for that lid to be left open and or accessed and opened by residents, and therefore limits contamination and contamination issues. Kathy, anything to add to that?
Yeah, completely agree. When we first started the project, our main objective was to increase recycling rates, but as a kind of consequence of everything that we put in, we significantly reduced contamination rates, and one of that was down to the main thing was down to the reverse lids and the apertures. But I would say also adding to that, Sarah, is you have to keep telling the crews to lock them, because during the first phase of the project, we used to go out and visit quite regularly to sort of just check on the site and that sort of thing. Every single time I visited, the lids were left unlocked at one of the sites. I know crews have got a lot to do, but please keep telling them to lock the lids, because it's really important. Otherwise you get these lovely, you know, great new bins with all this great signage and everything, and if the lids are left unlocked, then they're not going to be used properly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Just another really important communication channel, and that being with our crews, who are such a hugely important, along with our residents and our managing agents, such another critical part of this puzzle, to make sure that we communicating really well with everybody, and really kind of valuing the roles and responsibilities of all of those individuals, and making sure that they understand their role and why what they're doing is important, I think is really key there. So in this instance, crew training, with a real emphasis on the kind of importance and the reasoning for that is really key. So yeah, reverse lid bins and unlocked lids, just something that we do recommend. I mean, ultimately it just stops giant black bags full of all sorts of rubbish going in. Freya, next question, please.
Thanks. I think this might be in reference to a point that Liz covered, but on contamination in the cardboard bins, could you clarify if this was from other dry recycling materials or traditional contamination. It'd be good to know as we are looking into trials, separate cardboard or twin stream collections.
It was a bit of both. We did find quite a lot of DMR, so dry mixed recycling, in the cardboard bins as well, but equivalent levels, if not slightly higher, of non-target, the actual contamination in there as well. So I think again, it's not something that we would necessarily recommend in all cases. If there are particular issues on an estate with lots of cardboard being left by bins or blockages in the recycling bins being caused by that, then it might be something to look at. I don't have them right to hand, but the reports, the figures for the contamination levels and all the estates are in the report for the Flats Recycling 2 project, which is on the website. Or if I can answer that query sort of separately afterwards with more specific figures.
Well, thanks, Liz. There is quite a few questions around comms, so I'm going to try and summarise them a bit. One is there's a lot less visual representation of recyclables and food waste acceptable materials on the comms. Why is this? We found the CGI visuals really helpful for supporting residents who don't have English as a first language. Was there any feedback focus group on the comms, and how well the signage was understood? And can you advise or recommend any contractors used in installing signage, what to ask for in terms of floor vinyls, etc.? I think this might have been touched on, but maybe a question for you, Liz.
Yeah, so on the recommendations for what the floor vinyls, etc., should be in terms of size, within the toolkit, there is a section on the communications materials which has all of the signage and the materials used for each of the comms assets. So that should be helpful. If there are any specific queries about that, again, you can always drop us a line. In terms of the visuals, the sort of visual representation of materials is on most of the materials. It may be that the ones I've selected for the slides are mainly sort of the fun, some of the fun stickers, which were additional comms that we put on the bins to draw attention, and I've put them on there so to draw attention to the relaunch communications, but the actual materials around what can go in the recycling bin, so the bin signage does still have all of those materials on there, because yeah, we recognise that the visual is important for communicating that to people when they're standing in front of a bin and knowing what to put in it.
Thanks, Liz. We have one question on timescales. Could you put more emphasis on the resources needed and the stage timescales regarding your recommended scoping visits, site visits, revisits, monitoring visits, etc., and where this could be expected from obviously an already heavily pressed recycling team? So I think
very good question. And a very fair point. I think one thing that I'll hand over to the others to add in a minute, but one of the key things which is so important for us to remember, and we were talking about as a team before when we were preparing for today, is that when we present it as we have today, it's the most enormous package with the most incredible amount of work that perhaps may feel unachievable to many. And I think it's about recognizing the importance of making this fit your own resources and timeframes as well. So perhaps starting small scale rather than feeling like this is something that needs to be accomplished overnight with really limited resources, both in terms of manpower but also money. We're really aware that those constraints are really important. Does Liz or Kathy perhaps want to add in there?
Yeah, completely agree, Sarah. You know, local authorities are strapped for resources, strapped for cash. But I think it's important to sort of remember what's coming ahead in terms of EPR and consistency. EPR is going to be very much based on the effectiveness and efficiency of your service, and it may be seen that if you've got poor performing flats, that might affect your funding. Also, you've got consistency coming up as well. It's a huge challenge for all local authorities, but there is funding available through EPR that should help support some of the services, and also for new burdens through the food waste. But I think it's potentially about bringing this to the forefront of members and those budget holders who sort of hold the purse strings, to show that in the next few years that these services do need to be improved. They will affect potentially some of the funding mechanisms. And I think also, you know, people in flats deserve the same sort of similar levels of service of people at curbside bins. You know, they deserve to have good, clean bin stores, safe places to go, where they want to, you know, place their waste and recycling, good lighting, you know, places where there aren't rats and mess and that type of thing. So yes, it's a big challenge, but I think that there's a lot of argument, you know, there's a lot of pros for it, which I think could be put forward to those in a senior position.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's about what we mentioned earlier about kind of making sure that you get that buy-in, and something that we can try and help support on as well. And part of that question, I think, was around timeframes, which I know is kind of very specific depending on, you know, your resources, how many estates you are looking to deliver this on, etc. But I don't know if there's any further detail that anyone can provide to help respond to that.
No, again, it is about, sorry, Liz, it's about how many flats do you have, how spread out are they, what level of performance have they got at the moment. If they're all pretty good, then obviously it may not take so long. If they're quite poor, then maybe it takes a bit longer. Sorry, Liz, I think you were going to jump in on that.
No, I was just going to mention that in terms of kind of time and resource allocated to that side of things, that is included within the cost benefit calculator as well. So if you did want to have a look at that, that sort of allows for monitoring time and assessment time as part of the package, and can put a cost on that as well.
Liz, that's just while we're on that, sorry, Freya, taking away from your questions, but I think it might be worth you just quickly mentioning a little more about that tool in terms of the type of input information and output information, just so that people are aware of that and the value of it, and what kind of information they can gain from that.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, so the version that's live at the moment, which is in the process of being updated, but the current version is for jar recycling improvements. And it's basically a calculator where you put in the number of estates that you're looking to make improvements to, and the number of bins that you think you will require, whether that's new or refurbished, and it will automatically calculate sort of the communications materials that you will need associated with those. It will include the amount of time that it should take to make the assessments and do the monitoring for that. It will put sort of cost against improvements to bin stores. So it will ask you what sort of standard the bin stores are at the moment in terms of lighting and decoration, and yeah, what they're like currently. And then what it gives you is a sort of a ballpark estimate of how much it will cost to put those improvements in place to bring it up to FRP standard, but also the benefits of that in terms of what you could expect in terms of carbon benefits, so waste diverted to recycling from residual and the benefit of that, and also resident satisfaction benefit, and it gives you sort of an overall cost benefit figure at the end. So it is on our website, and there is a link to it going out with the slides as well.
Brilliant, thank you. Super. So with only 1 minute to go, I think we'll have to end the questions there. Yeah, amazing amount of questions, and there are many more there that we haven't, or some more there that we haven't answered. So we would do our best, I think, to try and get to some of those via an email perhaps, and send some responses out. And obviously just do get in touch if there is anything further that you would like to have information about. Just to sum up, 3 key takeaways. I think, as we've discussed today, Improving recycling services from flats is an ongoing process and not something that's going to be done overnight, but something which we really do all need to start looking at and then continuing to focus on as time progresses. And then in terms of services and communications, remember the ease, knowledge, motivation, and the importance of having that in mind throughout our journey with this. And as well, just remember that as we've talked about today, there's lots and lots of resources available from ReLondon, majority of those free, some of those if more bespoke for a small cost. So please do get in touch if there's anything that we can help with, and we'd be really pleased to talk to you about that. So thank you so much everybody for your time today. We will share a summary of the slides, and there will be a recording of the session available as well. Thank you very much for your time. Hopefully you found that an informative session today.